Hi everyone. I'm going to have you take out your Declaration of Independence, the actual words and things, and you're also going to need a highlighter. It doesn't have to be any specific highlighters, but if you want to have a couple of them, grab some from either the basket in the back of the room or from the black crate. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some time and we're going to go step by step through the Declaration of Independence and look at it for literary as well as historical historical impact. So if we were to look at the Declaration of Independence, sorry, I've got a couple of slides open here. The Declaration of Independence is so very important because, one, it was just an outstanding literary document. It is the most single read piece of prose, prose is anything that's not poetry, in the history of the world. Historically, it did something that no one had ever done before, and that was declare independency. And of course, it changed us all as far as society goes because it created a whole country called the United States of America that forever changed the history of the world. So by now you should have your markers, and we're going to take a look at things like the preamble, and we're going to look at things in chunks. So the first thing I'm going to point out is I'd like you to circle the word unanimous. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. Unanimous simply means that they required that all 13 colonies, there were 56 men, but they represented 13 colonies, that they either had to all agree to independency or they had to stay where they were at. And they said that this was a united, lowercase u, so it's an adjective, States of America. And so what they were saying is either we all go together or we all stay where we're at. And this was a form of a preface. When it says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they declare the causes which impel them to the separation. And I'm going to have you circle the word laws of nature and nature's God. What he's doing is he's setting up his ethos. He is saying not his ethos as Thomas Jefferson, but he is saying that basically God has entitled them to outline those issues that they have with the with England. Okay, so this is basically to declare the causes of why we are going to separate from Great Britain. So the famous line that you guys had to put in order for the Declaration of Independence escape room: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, that wherever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Okay? So this is the statement of beliefs. And if you remember, we said when we were looking at the breakup letters that there was the preamble, the statement of beliefs, and then they're going to go into the grievances. So I want you to stop at a moment and just talk at your tables. Is he talking about equal rights, natural rights, or human rights? And the answer to that is natural rights. Okay? So I want you to kind of write that he is talking about natural rights. I'm going to try to do this with the cursor. And I know none of you can read cursive anyway. Not too bad. Natural rights. Rights given to us by God and not by man. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the next one, and we're still talking about those things that are the reasons, not the reasons, the statement of beliefs. So prudence, which is another word for wisdom, is that those next two paragraphs, if you want to just put a bracket there or block it off, it is a general reason for the declaration. is that he's trying to say that this isn't something that came across easy, or that it was something that they did lightly, but that they were looking at the fact that despotism, which is underneath the idea that he is a tyrant, let me get a highlighter here, that he is a tyrant, and that it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such a government. So that's their statement of belief. And then they continue to go on and say, this is how we're going to alter it. And they name the person specifically who they are going to throw off. And that's Great Britain. This is logos. Here is where they are logically telling us what they're fighting. And this is an indictment of King George. An indictment is simply another word for like an arrest warrant. These are all the things that he's done that he deserves, that gives us the right to declare our independency. So we had the preamble, we had the statement of beliefs, and now we're going to have all these grievances. And this is going to be most of the paper. So if you look at it, the list of complaints or the list of charges, and I'm just going to have you take a moment, and I'm going to have you use a different color, something that you can do for anaphora. But notice that this is a list. It's anaphora, and then the fact that he uses, that this thing looks like a list. He has refused, he has forbidden, he has refused, he has called together, he has dissolved, he has refused, he has endeavored, and it just keeps going. That is parallelism. This whole section in the Constitution is a list of charges, not complaints. This is an indictment. And if I keep going, and you keep going with your highlighter, he has, and if you remember, these were all of the things that he did that were hidden in that hidden picture. Now, some people have tried to group what each of those are doing. The wrongs against the government, you'll see there's a red heading. Wrongs against justice. Notice how the King George is a control freak. You know, and it used to be a lot that I used to think, students need to know, what exactly he did. And you know what? You don't. That is just superfluous knowledge. So just take a moment, and I'm going to have you highlight in a color all of the anaphora. And if Mrs. Chadwick would want to hit pause to give everybody a chance to do that, you can do that now. Okay. All right. So a little bit further down, I need you to find the phrase that says, he has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, spurned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. And this parallelism here, and I'm going to have you write pathos. So we've had the ethos at the front saying that this is the reason that God has given us the right to do this. And then the logos, all of this list. But when he switches in his writing to plundered our seas, ravaged our coast, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people, he is switching now. He is switching to a more emotional part of his essay. And notice the words that he uses. Cruelty and perfidy, which is cruelty and torture. Taken captive, he uses words like executioner, Indian savage, tyrant, oppression. These are all buzzwords to kind of make us be afraid. And I missed one here. I just noticed one with like works of death and desolation and tyranny, barbarous ages, warfare, okay, and injury. And so all of this little section is so much pathos. And so that is, remember, a pretty good standard of the way to do an essay, is that you set up the logic, you set up your ethos, you set up your logic, and then you kind of bring it home with this pathos, and it keeps going. But he does go back to the logos, because now we are starting to talk about what are the elements of redress. Remember that redress is what have we done so far? Okay, so now they're trying to tell us, hey, we've tried. This is not something that, we're taking lightly. We have tried really, really hard to make it work. And he says, we've warned them, we've reminded them, we've appealed to them, we've conjured, they're deaf to everything that we've said. They're appealing to the brethren of the British people. This again is some logos, it's important logos, after such a passionate plea. But now comes the actual declaration. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, and I want you to highlight that because you'll notice that the U is now capitalized. And that is the first time the name of our country has been used in a formal document. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world, God again, for the restitute of our intentions due in the name of authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare a resolution of independency, that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is, and ought to be, totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, trade, and to do all other things and acts which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, and with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. And there's some more pathos. So notice the yellow. The yellow is the Declaration of Independence. That actually is declaring what's happening. And notice the pathos of connecting it to this is a God thing. And I want you to understand that they did not take this lightly, this declaration that they were signing. They pledged their sacred lives, their fortunes, and their honor. I want you to understand that these men did not do this lightly. Of these men, you're going to see some that I have circled and highlighted and underlined here. But I want you to remember that John Hancock was the president of the Continental Congress, and he was the only one to have a signature for some time. But 5 of these signers were actually captured, and they were by the British as traitors, and they were tortured and killed. 12 of them lost their homes and had them burned to the ground. Many of them had lost their sons. 9 of the 56 actually fought and died from their wounds of the Revolutionary War. They signed this document and they went out and fought and they died. I want to point out a couple of people here. John Adams goes on to become president. He's from Massachusetts there. There is Carter Braxton of Virginia, if you can, let me highlight his name here. Carter Braxton right here. He was a wealthy planter and trader, and he owned a lot of ships. And he used his ships to kind of fight the British Navy, and the British Navy confiscated all of his ships. He had to sell his home to pay his debts, and he ended up dying in rags. Thomas McKeon, who was in Delaware, I think it is. Where's Delaware? Thomas McKeon. He's actually one of my favorites. He was so hounded by the British that he was forced to hide them almost constantly. He never was paid for serving in Congress, and his family was kept in hiding. And at the end of the war, he died penniless. Everything that he owned was taken from him. A man by the name of Thomas Nelson Jr., which I believe, where's Thomas? There he is, Virginia. His house had been taken over by the British, and they were using his home as a headquarters. So he went to George Washington and told them to level it. He said, bomb it. And they go, but that is your home. He says, it does not matter. And they bombed the crap out of it, leveled it to the ground, and he later died bankrupt. Okay? Francis Lewis from New York. I have his name circled here. Francis Lewis of New York his home and his properties were destroyed. They took his wife and put her in jail, and in the basement of the jail, and he was going to turn himself in, and she said, "No, you will not. I am just as much a patriot as you," and she died while she was in jail. John Hart, let's see if I can remember where John Hart is. Oh man, I can't find him. There he is. I have him underlined even, of New Jersey. His wife had just given birth, and unfortunately she was dying in childbirth. He had to hide the baby. They had 13 children, and they all ran for their lives. They scattered in the fields, and they just scattered because they were running for their lives. More than a year later, he was still living in forests and in caves, and his wife didn't die, and his children were taken in by neighbors, and he never saw his children again because he was killed a week later. This was not just some of these men, everyone. This was a lot of these men. And so when they say that I pledge our sacred lives, pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor, they truly did. Okay? Mrs. Chadwick is going to hand out a study guide. Actually, it's just a guide for you to use with your notebook. And on Wednesday, you're going to have a quiz, quest, however you want. It is going to be over the elements of the Age of Reason, Ben Franklin, his resume, and his two pieces. We did aphorisms and his autobiography. And then we read Thomas Jefferson. Don't forget to take a look at his resume and all of the things he accomplished, and the Declaration of Independence. All of those things you will be responsible for. And so, whoops, I don't have that here. So please take a moment to take a look at that study guide and use it as a guide for your quiz that you're going to have on Wednesday. You may work together to fill it in. All right, have a good day, and we'll see you. You guys can stop in and see me if you need me tomorrow. All right?